Hi, it's Damien LeVeck, owner of Skubalon Creative, here to show Avid users what's new in the builder of the 2019.5 release of Boris Sapphire. Additionally, using the builder, I'll show you how to create a stylistic effect for reformatting video of a different aspect ratio. You'll get into the builder the same way you always did by finding the Sapphire Builder category in your effect palette and dragging an S effect onto whatever clip you want. Go into effect mode and then go to Edit Effect. Once the builder loads, the first thing that you'll notice is an updated user interface with a dark background and a number of other enhancements. The first and most exciting improvement, in my opinion, is we now have video in the playback window of the builder. And we also have the option to not only play video in the builder, but also loop it, play it straight to the end, and then stop, and also bounce the video back and forth once it gets to the end. Once the video caches, it should play back in real time. While it might not seem obvious at first glance, the other great thing about the new interface is that it's optimized for high-resolution displays like what you might have on a 5K iMac. So everything that you see in the interface, whenever you move the panels around, will always be super sharp and look great. Next, the builder now supports broadcast monitor output through a capture card or other video card, which you can now access through the View menu under Reference Monitor. Choose your output device and then choose the format that you'd like. If you've never used the builder before, I'd like to encourage everybody to give it a shot. It's actually the most efficient and best way to create your own custom effects and transitions using Boris Sapphire. Once you get into the interface, you'll see a few different panels. On the bottom is your workspace. The workspace has a few different nodes. These are called nodes, and the source is always going to be the clip that you have the S effect filter dropped onto in your Avid timeline. Background and mask are more advanced functions that we can talk about in another tutorial. But essentially, once you have the source loaded up, you can go over into your components panel over here, scroll down, and have all the different Boris Sapphire effects that you're used to seeing at your disposal. So I'm just going to go into the search field and search for glow, which is a classic. We're all used to finding that. And then just drag it right here onto the source node, and it is applied. And over here in my parameters panel, I can change the brightness and all the other parameters in the same way that I'm used to seeing whenever I'm working in Avid. But the thing is that you should know is that this is way snappier and way faster than whenever you're working in the effect editor. Next, let's say I want to stack another effect on top of this. And I'll just scan for something down here, such as edge rays. And I'll drag an edge rays on top of glow. And it's going to apply it underneath the glow. So this is the same thing as applying an effect on top of another effect whenever you're working in Avid. Now, I'm just going to hit undo and show you that if I were to apply edge rays onto source, now it's actually applying the edge rays first and then applying the glow. If you ever want to change the order of these nodes after you've applied them, you can simply right click and then you have a number of different options here. Disable, you can disconnect it and actually pull it out, move this one down and then drag it up here. That's one way to rearrange. Another one is to delete it entirely and then add edge rays again. You have quite a bit of flexibility. One thing to note over here in the parameters window is that you've got these check marks next to each one of the parameters. These parameters are the ones that are going to show up in your effect editor once you've created your effect. So let's say you're creating a custom look for something that you, for a show that you're working on, okay? And you want to be able to have some flexibility with changing the way that it looks, but you don't want your effect editor to get cluttered with every single parameter there is. So with edge rays selected, for example, I'm going to go over here and I'm just going to first start by unchecking everything. Because maybe whenever I'm working with this, I only want to be able to change, let's say the center, the XY coordinates for the effect. So I want to have that one turned on. I definitely want to be able to change the length of my rays. So I'm going to check this one. And then let's say I want to be able to change my ray color and my ray brightness. And we'll just say that these colors are blue and that's all. Okay, now I want to do the same thing for glow. So under glow, I'm going to uncheck everything. I definitely want to be able to adjust my brightness in the effect editor whenever I come back to this. So I'm going to check that one. I'm going to check my color once again so that I have the same flexibility that I did with the rays. Click OK. And I definitely want to be able to select my threshold and be able to change that on a shot-by-shot basis. Okay, I love this. Here's my combine mode. Let's go ahead and change that to add and make something that looks kind of neon. And we're good to go. I'll hit OK. And now when you come back into your timeline, notice over here in your effect editor, all the parameters that I had selected in the builder are the ones that show up here. So now I can change these and keyframe these to my heart's delight. One of the great features of Boris Sapphire is having access to the builder and all of the different presets that come loaded with the software. And one of the most popular ones for those of us who work in broadcast is preset for reformatting video of different aspect ratios. So in this case here, reformatting 4:3 video for 16:9 frame. After you've dropped your S effect on your clip and you go into your effect editor, if you click on load preset, the preset browser shows up. Click on builder effects to sift out all the builder effects and scroll down or search for advanced reformat 4:3 to HD. Load that up, and just with a simple click of a button, you now add a blurred background and a cropped foreground picture with a single effect that you can keep in your bin and reuse over and over again. And you'll notice that over here in the effect editor, you can change all sorts of different parameters on this effect, like the amount that you're cropping your foreground footage, and so on and so forth. Now, this is a very common look. You see this everywhere. So today what I'd like to do is show you how you can take vertical iPhone video like this and do something a little bit more fun with it, reformatting it, giving it a little bit more life to fill out your frame and make it look like this. And I thought this would be a lot better than just putting blurred curtains on each side. So let's step into the builder and I'll show you exactly how I put this together. Okay, we're here in the builder, and the first thing I'm going to do is I'm actually going to rearrange the workspace a little bit just so I have a little bit more room to play with my node tree. So I'm going to put the workspace, just drag and drop it over here next to my components window, and then resize the windows until I have it looking about how I want. Now I can drag this around and have a little bit more room underneath, which I like. Now, the first thing we want to do is we want to create our background. Notice again we have video in our playback window, so we can see what this is going to look like without having to go back to Avid, so that's super cool. And we have to think about this in terms of layers. So think of the background as the back layer, and then we've got all these different elements that we're going to create on top of that. So the first thing we'll do, very simply, is create our background. And we can start by blowing up the background, which I'm going to do with a warp transform, which you can find under the distort category. Drop it on top of this guy, and I'm just going to drag it over here, and this is going to be my background area. All right, and let's scale this up. And I'm going to scale the X parameter quite a bit. All right, and you can also type in values if you want. So I'll say 5, and for Y, I'll say 3. Okay, and now let's say we want to add a little bit of a blur to it. So this time I'm just going to type in blur, grab a simple blur, drop it on top. I can adjust the amount of that. And I'm also going to just turn off these parameters. I only want to turn on the blur. And on warp transform, I'm going to call this, say I only want to change the scale here. Also, whenever I'm creating a complex effect, I like to rename my nodes so that I know exactly what all of them do whenever I look in the effect editor. So on this one, I'm just going to say this one is BG resize. And then this one is BG blur. And if you want to add a little color cast to it, you can do that too. And that's under the adjust category. I'm just going to grab a hue, saturation, and brightness. I'm going to drop that on top. First thing I'll do is uncheck all my parameters so they don't show up in the effect editor. Click on scale colors and choose a color that I like. Something more aquatic, like that. Okay, and I like to be able to edit these later, so I'm going to check the checkboxes. Great. We'll call this BG color. All right, the next thing we want to do is we want to get our foreground layer. So the first thing we'll do is we'll look at our source, and you'll notice that I click on source and I don't see anything because we're actually looking at the result right now. So what I want to do is I want to make sure I have preview selected node turned on. Now I can actually see my source. And I want to be able to crop this. So if I want to use this later on and I'm using footage that's a different aspect ratio, different size, I can crop the edges. So I'm going to do that with an S crop. So I'll just type in crop up here. I'll find that. It's actually under tools. So I'll drag that baby right on top. And I actually don't want to crop the background. So I'm just going to take the output from the source and drag it right onto resize. And now I've got the beginnings of another layer. So I'm just going to rename this source crop. So I'm going to crop it just shy of the edge, right there. The next thing is I want to do a scramble. Now, tile scramble is just the one I chose on this one. It's under the stylized category. It's a way of sort of messing up the image in a way that I thought was kind of cool. So I'm going to grab a tile scramble, drop that on there, and basically just play with this until I get the look that I like. Now let's place our source on top of this, okay? So if we want to do that, you're going to find all that under Tools, Composite, okay? And I'm going to drop Composite on there. And when we zoom in, you'll notice that if I hover over this, it says front and this is back. Well, I want the scrambled part to be the back. So, and then I want the source to be the front. So I'm going to take the output of the source and I'm going to plug it into front. And now whenever I click on this, oh, I'm sorry, it has to be out of the crop because we're cropping our image. Now we can see our scrambled pieces underneath our source. Okay, now one other thing that I did just to make the scramble stick out a bit more was I dropped another warp transform between source crop and tile scramble to make this sort of stick out a bit more. And you can drop it right here on the line, and that's another easy way of connecting it. But I just zoom in a bit, so that made the tile scramble a little bit bigger, and now there's more sticking out on the edges. All right, so now let's make another layer. All right, let's make another scramble resize. So we're gonna take my warp transform, I'm just gonna drop it right here. And the nice thing about the grid, if you turn snap to grid on down here, it helps you kind of keep yourself organized, keep things lined up. So I'm going to say scramble resize 2. All right. And we'll plug into our input from the source crop. And let's make this one a little bit bigger. Remembering to turn these off as I go through them, my checkboxes. Because if you don't turn off your checkboxes, it's going to load up your effect editor, and it's just going to be a load of different parameters that you'll never touch, and it'll just annoy you. So keep these unchecked here if you can remember to do that. And now let's grab our tile scramble again. This time, actually, if you want to, you can go down here, you can right-click and then choose duplicate. And now I can use the exact same one that I was using before, and then just alter those parameters. You see already this is nice because it's filling up the entire frame, whereas, you know, if you just had blurred curtains on each side, that'd be sort of boring. All right, so let's apply some color. So I'm going to choose Scan Lines Mono here, drop that on, and I'll just right away rename this Scramble to Color. And you see we applied some scan lines to this guy. Let's make them a little bit sharper. Choose a color that we like, something more aquatic. If we just leave this how it is, they're going to be static. So I thought, let's give them a little bit of movement, so we can use shake for that. Find shake under the distort category. There it is. Drag it on top. I didn't want it to be shaking constantly, so I actually changed the style to twitchy. And now it's just doing intermittent shakes. And then the other thing that's fun to do is under channels, bump up the amplitude on the different colors of the channels. You're getting a chromatic aberration on the edges here. I'm going to bump up my blue amplitude and see what that does. So it makes it a little bit more interesting. Let's create our next layer. You can just highlight all these like this and choose duplicate selection. One thing you do have to do is you have to reattach the inputs on all your nodes. So what we're going to do is we're going to take this scramble here and we're going to put it on top of this scramble here. So let's resize this baby quite a bit more. Here's our scramble. Now these are going to be our smaller pieces. Now we need to combine these two layers. So I'm going to use Composite once again, and it's under Tools. If you're ever looking for it, you can also just type it in, but it's under Tools all the way down at the bottom. Drag Composite over. You can drag it on top of one of your nodes. You notice that it automatically connects to the front of the one that I dragged it on top of, and then we want to put this guy in the back. Now what we're going to do is we are going to put our background behind this. We need another composite node, and I'm going to drop it on top of this composite node. I'm just going to move it over here a bit so we can kind of see what we're doing a little bit better. Alright, now I'm going to drag background into the back input. And then finally, we want to take our foreground layer and we're going to place it on top of this one. So we'll do one more composite. Alright. This is the background. Up here, this is the foreground. Finally, to round this out, just take your final composite node and plug it into result. And so that whenever you uncheck preview selected node and you drop this in your timeline, wherever you drop it, it'll look right. And if you wanted to create a little bit of separation between your foreground element and the tile scrambled background elements, you could put a drop shadow in there. Okay, go back to our timeline. We've got a beautiful effect. It fills up the whole frame. Thanks for watching. For the latest tutorials and updates from Boris Effects, please subscribe to the YouTube channel.